we exercise, we eat right, we fill our brains with positive thoughts, we work on our attitude problems, we make ourselves of service, we learn to see the intelligence and the wisdom in all our fellow human beings. We cultivate self-compassion, and then we share that compassion with all of the cosmos. Labor and the expression of worth. We gravitate toward relationships that will tolerate our dysfunction. People who are able to see our dysfunction clearly are repelled by us. So if we want to be in relationships, our choices are limited. We are unconsciously drawn to people who will enable us to continue in our dysfunction. This is why those of us who have been abused tend to find ourselves over and again in abusive relationships. In reality, there are no abusers or abused. There are no oppressors or oppressed, victimizers and victims, predators and prey, because these situations have no real substance. When we find ourselves in one or the other of these roles, we may choose to free ourselves by realizing a deeper truth about who we are in relationship to one another. There is no freedom for those of us who impose our will on others, and there is no freedom for those of us who give our will away to others. These relationships have no substance. If there is no real nourishment in these relationships, why then do we live like this? Why do abused children return to abusive parents, even in adulthood? Why do abused spouses remain in their circumstances? How might we rise above this unconscious programming that we were born into? Is it possible to disidentify from that part of ourselves that is seeking out abusive relationship? Might we transcend those sick parts of ourselves that do not want to get better? Our egoic nature wants nothing to do with freedom. Why is that? Freedom is the death of the ego. Freedom is the death of the oppressed and the oppressor. But the ego loves for these relationships to continue. The ego finds its very existence in these relationships of inequality. How then might we relate to one another with all this unconsciousness in our lives? How can we be released from this bondage in which we find ourselves so sickeningly enmeshed? What is it like to begin to wake up from the nightmare of fear and self-loathing? Self-loathing, you say, is it really that extreme? We may, at some dreadful point along the timeline of self-development, realize just how miserable we truly are. We may see clearly how we are asking others to participate in our misery. We may begin to witness how these internal acts of terrorism, which occur inside of us, how they start to reach out into our small spheres of influence. We may begin to witness the worry and concern that we have become to those of us who say they love us. We may make great efforts to change ourselves. We may have profound religious experiences. Maybe we go to treatment centers. We abstain from those activities that seem at first to be the root of our suffering, until we finally realize that these things that we do, that we call sin, these shallow and destructive activities, actually they're just the symptoms of a deeper problem. We abstain from those unwanted activities anyway, and we fill our lives with more wholesome actions. We exercise, we eat right, we fill our brains with positive thoughts, we work on our attitude problems, we make ourselves of service, we learn to see the intelligence and the wisdom in all our fellow human beings. We cultivate self-compassion, and then we share that compassion with all of the cosmos. Our meditations become deeper and longer. We educate ourselves to the point that everyone and everything is now our teacher. We rediscover all the practices that we thought had failed us. We devote ourselves to many fearless and searching moral inventories. We become transparent in our search. We become fearless, unafraid to let everyone see. We invite inquiry. We invite conversation. We explore the depths of all the generations that have come before us. We embody the beginner's mind, allowing ourselves to relearn all the lessons that we thought we already got. We know now what it means to truly love our enemies. We pray for all those who seem to have rejected us. We realize that the only rejection all along was the rejection that we projected on ourselves and out into the world. We forgive ourselves, again, knowing now that there is no one to forgive because we are not separate from one another. We then realize that no one has anything to teach us, that there is only one teacher, and that teacher is within. Then that teacher starts showing up again, full force, in everyone and everything. We submit ourselves joyfully to this self-annihilation. The annihilation of that sick and jealous self-loathing that we once so firmly identified with. We open up further, going to places that offend the ego at every opportunity. We see more clearly now how the egoic realm holds us, and yet we still seem to be held to the storylines that all of us, the oppressed and the oppressors, are forgivably writing. We see now others waking up. The first sign is so often outrage. We see it all, including ourselves, strapped to this manic depressive roller coaster that we call normal life. And so many of those people now who insist so assuredly that they love us, we see those people trying to save us, but every move we make only programmed in our subconscious. Even those who want to help us cannot. They are trying to save someone else, someone who does not exist. They want to draw us back into the matrix, back into the illusion. They want us to come back. The path of liberation is threatening to all those individual manifestations of consciousness into which we were born. So, we continue. There is no other path now. There is nothing to go back to. There is no one who can save us. There is no one to be saved. And yet, the fearful one, the abused one, continues to tremble. He pleads to be seen. He wants you to want him. He needs you to need him. He wants, he needs. Little by little, he lets go. He releases you of your responsibility toward him. He wanders off into the annihilation, all the while documenting in some kind of fashionable YouTuber content creation fantasy. He does not know where he will sleep tonight. And yes, this still scares him somewhat, but the fear must be dealt with at some point. He cries, he prays earnestly, he prays for Creator to take him home now. Some of you watch him. He does not know who you are, just as you can never really know him. What is the end of all this? Is there a resolution, a happy ending? We love happy endings, yes? Here it is. Are you ready? Nothing ever happened. None of us were ever even here. We are all waking up to the absolute absurdity of this world that we have created for ourselves. For now, it seems that we all keep working it out. We continue crying and laughing and making videos and learning new games. We keep wanting, we keep hunting and gathering these primates with the growing neocortexes. These symbolic language creatures. We keep telling stories, even once we realize that the story is what we are waking up from. We keep forgiving, thereby setting ourselves free. We keep praying, we keep trying. We exhaust ourselves at every opportunity. We keep cycling the highs and the lows. We continue clinging to the side of this planet which seems to be spiraling through a vast, cold, and lonely universe. We become fearless when we realize that no one ever dies. We transcend the pitiful stories of fear and isolation. We realize that we were never alone. We defy those who would lead us back into our own cage. We would rather this life be over than to submit ourselves to the sick will of the individual, whether that individual is the self or the other. We surrender to the depths, and we pray for an honorable death, the death of a warrior. We pray for the courage to keep walking. We pray for everyone and everything. We offer our lives as a point of reference. We divorce ourselves from the need to be seen, from the need to be acknowledged, from the need to be held, even as we cringe against the cold, even as our flesh longs to be touched, even as our individual longs to be found in a tribe. We accept. We understand now. This is what we chose. We chose to come here and see this. We chose to come here and live in this world which does not know what love is. We insist of ourselves compassion and understanding, because any other way is only suffering. We watch as those we once thought wise are enveloped in the mindless, consuming spirit of our times. We see all this with the greatest compassion because we have known it in ourselves. All the dysfunction, all the oppression, all the victimization, the greed, the jealousy, the aloneness. We have seen all of this in ourselves so clearly. So now we can only love. Now we are calling for communion. It is all that is left. There is no finger pointing, no accusations. We are asking you to look deeply at yourself and discover what is really going on. It is time to assemble. It is time to remember. It is time to be remembered. It is time to come together. It is time to learn to care for one another. It is time to integrate our tribal nature in its most inclusive form. It is time to decide for ourselves what has true worth. It is time to exhaust ourselves in the pursuit of depth. These are not the words of an ill man. These are the wisdom of the ages. I know that I am well because I love you. This plea that I make to you today to return to sanity, in order to say these words, I've had to walk away from everything. Everything that I said I loved and all of what I once called security. I've had to turn from all the shame and self-loathing to make this very reasonable plea that we return to sanity. I have done this so that I can make this very reasonable request of you. Here it is. Are you ready? Walk away from everything that holds you in bondage. Drop everything that weighs you down. All of you who labor in vain, every one of you who bears the burden of a sick and dying culture. Reach for the depths. Exhaust yourself in the greatest pursuits. Experiment with what it means to be fearless. Make it a prayer. See through this world. See through yourself. See through this illusion of separateness. Discover what it means for yourself to love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. Let's discover together what it means to love one another. May we be known by our love. May we be willing to have a dream. May we be willing to die for that dream. May we be willing to live for that dream. May we become that great one, the I Am, that complete and perfect stillness which resides at the center of each of us and in all of us. I want to take a moment to thank all of those who have recently chose to make pledges through Patreon. This work is supported through listeners just like you. You can help me greatly by pledging even a small amount each month. It will help in the continuation of this project that I'm calling Labor and the Expression of Worth, where we align our labor with our deepest values. When we support a tribe member, we deepen a tribe, and depth tribes feed the world.